conmigo. Vámonos al viaje para buscar los sonidos mágicos de Ecuador.
This is the Winged Virgin of Quito, at the top of Panaceo Hill. The 135-foot tall statue overlooks the city of Quito. Made of 7,000 pieces of aluminum, it is the only statue of Mary in the world with wings. This is the 16th century Independence Square, also known as Plaza Grande. In the center of the square is a monument to Quito's independence from Spain. On the square are the Presidential Palace and the Cathedral of Quito. The domes of the cathedral are covered with a glazed green ceramic. This is the San Francisco Church, the first Catholic church in the city. A few blocks away is the Church of La Merced. We are walking through Old Quito, trying to find an area called La Ronda. Roses, one of Ecuador's largest exports. This is the 16th century church of Santo Domingo. Our guidebook says it's easy to find La Ronda from here. Not that easy, but we found it. One of the oldest streets in Quito, it had become a run-down, dangerous place in the 70s. But it has undergone a major renovation. We picked the wrong time to come because almost nothing was open. Leaving the central part of Old Town, up this hill is the Basilica of Quito. Construction on the Neo-Gothic style basilica began over 100 years ago, and it is still not complete. You could ascend into the spire and the 380-foot tall towers for great views of the city. Instead of gargoyles, there are native Ecuadorian animals, such as tortoises and iguanas. $2 gets you inside the church, where you can see the beautiful stained glass. The highlight is going to the towers and steeple, another $2. From the towers, the view lets you appreciate the hilliness of the city. And there's the Virgin of Quito. To get to the steeple, you cross a catwalk, climb a ladder to the outside, and go up more ladders until you reach the steeple. where you can look back on the towers that you just came from. And enjoy more views of the city. This is the Intian Museum, where you are actually at latitude 0, the equator line. We are waiting for our museum guide, who will tell us about the indigenous people and show us some interesting demonstrations.
Bacon heads?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, let me show you two real ones and I'm going to explain the process of the ritual. Okay? Human head is 170 years old and it is just skin. Not have bones inside the head because it's impossible to reduce or shrink.
Totem poles from around the world.
The equinox are in 2 days in March 21st and September 23rd. In these days, in this area, our shadows disappear because the sun is destroying the line. 12 o'clock, the sun is over ahead and our shadows disappear for 3 minutes. We don't have shadow in this period.
I'm in both the northern and southern hemisphere at the same time.
This is a demonstration of the Coriolis effect. On the equator, you can't see any rotation. Move the tub to the northern hemisphere and watch. Now the southern hemisphere.
The position, both hands, and now do a tiny movements. Like this.
Not so easy to do. Oh, almost. Nope, I can't get it.
I was one of 2 people in our group to balance the egg. Keeping your balance on the equator line is a challenge.
Okay. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, relax now. When we are in the hemispheres, there is more gravity. When we have more gravity, we have more resistance in our muscles. We feel strong. More gravity, more resistance, okay? Now, stand on the line, please. Same thing. Higher, please. But now, I try pulling down your arms with 2 fingers, okay? 1, 2, and 3.
Wow.
An example of an indigenous dwelling. The guinea pigs aren't pets, they're cooked and eaten. We are about 15 miles outside of Cuenca, in an area called Cojitambo, where we spent the day rock climbing. It was one of the first climbing areas developed in Ecuador and has many climbs. My favorite part was playing with the guide's lab, Melcocha. After climbing, the guide drove us to a lookout point for some great views. We also saw some Inca ruins built around 1450. When we returned to Cuenca, we went to see the cathedral, known as the Church of the Immaculate Conception. The two square towers at the top are unfinished because of a miscalculation and can't support any weight. Its domes are covered with tiles imported from Central Europe. Inside are stained glass windows from Germany and an altar covered in gold leaf. Also on the plaza, we saw a large protest in progress and found out it was a protest against an increase in taxes. On the other side of the plaza, they are constructing structures for fireworks because the Corpus Christi festival is being celebrated this week. Traditional holiday candy and cookies are for sale. Hundreds of stands line the streets, each with tables piled high with candy, pastries, and cookies. The evening ends with a fireworks show. Today, we are mountain biking around Cuenca. Our first stop is at a street market. From here, you can see the domes of the cathedral and also the Church of San Francisco. Our next stop is at a very small square that overlooks the Tomebamba River that we will ride along. This is some of the street art that you will see in Cuenca. A Panama hat shop. Panama hats originated in Ecuador, not Panama. We are down by the river where we follow a bike trail. On that hill are ruins of the ancient Cañari culture. These are some of the hanging houses built into the cliff overlooking the river. I guess many of the local people still wash their clothes in the river. Back in town, we saw the Gringo Laundry. After the bike ride, we walked past the old cathedral to the Central Park, the center of action in Cuenca. In the center is a monument to Calderon, a hero in the battle for independence. Our last stop was a large indoor market. And soon it's time to fly back to Quito. We are on our way to Otavalo. Otavalo is known for its crafts and textile markets, which fill the plaza. walked down the main street to the church. The plaza by the church has a monument to an Inca general, and more markets. In the afternoon, we came here to hike around Lake Cuicocha, a crater lake on the slopes of the Cotacachi volcano. I didn't know how long the hike was until I read the sign. While the guide tells us about the hike, the only thing that I could think of is that this is going to be one long hike. The 2-mile-wide caldera was created by a massive eruption more than 3,000 years ago. The trail is called the Orchid Trail, and there are colorful flowers along the path. Looking back on the trail we just started, we have to go all the way to the other side. A view of the Imbabura volcano and Otavalo. The two islands in the middle of the lake are actually old lava domes. We reach the halfway point where we have lunch. It's mostly downhill from here. We made it to the other side. Let's hear from Mark.
It's the rim of the crater of the volcano, and we walked all the way around it almost. We will by the time we're done.
Almost.
There's some farmland as we reach the end of the trail. It's still an hour to the car.
Well, after a quite strenuous hike, 5 hours worth, to the top of the volcano, we got to see a nice lake up there, Cuicocha, I believe it's called. And then we came back down, and here we are at this really nice lodge where we had a very delicious trout dinner, and it has a nice little fireplace in our suite.
We are at the Papayacta Hot Springs Resort, but first we have to hike to a waterfall before we can relax in the springs. These flowers are a type of parasitic mistletoe taking over the host tree. For a while, the trail follows a river, then past a farm with llamas, and into the vegetation of a high-altitude cloud forest, until we reach the waterfall. The trail back is dangerously close to the river here.
Second day lake is a nice relaxing hike, over 2 hours. Got close to the waterfall.
Soon we'll be soaking in the hot springs. There are 9 thermal pools with temperatures between 97 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. We started in the hottest pool.
The water was very nice. One pool was pretty warm, and one's kind of hot. I like the kind of hot one. Felt good.
We stopped at a hummingbird reserve on the way to our hotel. Ecuador holds the world's record for the number of hummingbird species in one country. Of the 132 different hummingbirds, you can easily see 30 different ones here. We are at our lodge in Tena in the Amazon River forest. Our room overlooks the river, and our towels are in the shape of scorpions. This morning, we're going whitewater rafting. It rained all night, and this Class 3+ section of the Hatanyacu River is running high and fast. This is one of the main tributaries that form the Amazon River. It was around here where we hit one rapid that bounced me out of the raft, and I went rushing down the river. While the raft guide tried to rescue me, with no one to give paddling directions, the entire raft flipped over. It didn't take long before they flipped the raft back and got in. But I'm still out there somewhere. The rescue kayak got to me and took me to the larger raft. Then I was reunited with my group. I was okay, and we continued on what was a most memorable trip. On the way to Baños, our first stop is here to see the waterfalls called Devil's Cauldron. After hiking down the trail, it looks like we might get wet. Through a path cut into the rocks, we can get even closer. But wait, there's more. We can go right under the waterfalls. Then we go down to a suspension bridge for one last view. Driving to the next waterfall, there seems to be a problem. After waiting for 2 hours, we gave up and went here for lunch. Back in line and not making any progress, our guide decides to bike up to see when the road will reopen. It wasn't much longer that the landslides were cleared. We drove to Baños for the night, but we didn't get to see the other waterfall. This morning, we are driving to the Cotopaxi volcano, where we are going to mountain bike down the volcano. At the park entrance, we wait for a park guide that will go with us. As we drive through the park, you can see the layers added after each eruption. This is where we start mountain biking. In the trip brochure, it said it was a downhill ride from the base of Cotopaxi. But we're not going downhill. We're taking a loop trail. It's extremely windy. Listen. It wouldn't be bad if it was at our backs, but it's a strong headwind. Maybe you can see that mark is actually being towed by our guide. For a minute or two, the wind is at our backs, and it's so strong you don't need to pedal. After 2 hours of hard pedaling, we get to take a break near some Inca ruins. It's a long way back, and somehow the wind is still against us. It's a relief to make it back to the lodge. It was much windier than this chicken seems to indicate. Fortunately, it didn't rain until we were at the lodge. When it cleared, there was a great view of Cotopaxi, one of the world's highest active volcanoes, which was also showing activity while we were there. And this is our last view of Quito, as we waited in a parking lot for 2 hours because our guide's license plate didn't allow him to enter the city until 8 p.m. It's our first day in the Galapagos on San Cristobal Island. We begin with a walk to the interpretive center. Past a well-camouflaged lizard. Then we go up Frigate Hill. That's Kicker Rock in the background where we'll snorkel tomorrow. Below is where we'll do a practice snorkel later. Frigate Hill is named for the 3 types of frigate birds that nest here. There's a nice view of town from here, too. It's time to go practice snorkeling, where you could swim with the sea lions. This statue of Charles Darwin marks the original site where he first came ashore in the Galapagos. Walking back, the beach is covered with sea lions. Our guide says that we'll get tired of seeing them. There's a sea iguana, and a good look at a blue-footed booby. Some Sally Lightfoot crabs, also known as red rock crabs. Some local kids having fun. This pelican doesn't mind us getting close. More sea lions. That seems like an unusual place to sleep. Early the next day, we have breakfast with a view. There are 2 activities scheduled, kayaking and snorkeling. We're kayaking first, so we take the kayaks down to the water. Here's the map of where we'll go. And we're off. I really didn't like all the side-to-side movement. There's a blue-footed booby. A great blue heron. After a couple hours of paddling, we get into a larger boat. We're going to a beach for some relaxation. We pass Kicker Rock, where we'll snorkel later. pulling into the cove, we go to the beach. The kids found a sea lion to play with. It's a beautiful beach that has annoying flies that bite if you stand still. Saw this guy on the way back to the boat where we had lunch. When we arrived at Kicker Rock, I'm thinking that this is a little rough for snorkeling. Fortunately, we began here where it's not so rough and snorkel through the channel. We held on to a life ring that the guide pulled. Way below us were sharks. Rays swam by. Wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. It's time to go back to the hotel. Along the way, our guide sees a whale, supposedly as big as our boat. This morning, we are flying to Isabella Island on this small plane. So small that one of the passengers is in the co-pilot seat. After a short flight, we go to our hotel with this beachfront view. We get our bikes and bike along the shoreline for a visit to the Wall of Tears. First, we pass by some marine iguanas, and a little later on, there's a giant tortoise. This type of cactus plant is found only in the Galapagos. A short hike will bring us to the Wall of Tears. Isabella was once a penal colony, and this massive wall of lava rocks was built by the prisoners. We stopped at a lookout point. Isabella Island is the largest of the Galapagos Islands and one of the youngest, formed by the merger of 6 volcanoes. Next we'll see a lava tunnel. This is the entrance to the lava tunnel, and this is the inside. This is Love Beach, popular with the local people of the community and the crabs and iguanas. The last stop on our tour is at Flamingo Lagoon. This morning, we are in the highlands to hike the Sierra Negra volcano. The trail passes through some lush fern-covered trees. Our guide points out this tortoise poop, but we didn't see any giant tortoises here. Our very passionate guide talks about this invasive plant and this native plant, a member of the aster family. This is the second largest volcanic caldera in the world and one of the most active in the Galapagos. The last eruption was in 2005. As our hike continues, the vegetation gets drier and the landscape becomes almost alien-like. Some lava lizards, a lava tube, From this opening, you could feel the heat of the steam. We could have continued hiking until we reached the caldera of the Chico volcano, but we decided to head back. The return hike was wet and muddy. It's lunchtime, and we're having barbecued chicken. I think it will be quite fresh. They have an interesting oven here. After lunch, we walk through their garden, past the bamboo and the banana tree, until we find this giant tortoise and a yellow warbler. And then we head for our next activity. We are going to snorkel at Las Tintoreras, a small group of islands off the coast of Isabela. We arrived at the cove where we'll snorkel, and there are blue-footed boobies and Sally Lightfoot crabs. Look closely at the water, and you can see the Galapagos penguins swimming here. While we were snorkeling, they were all around us. Next is a walk on a small island where hundreds of iguanas sunbathe in the lava fields. Frigate birds like to steal the eggs from the nests of iguanas. And I bet this guy thinks iguana eggs are tasty too. Our guide tells us that lava lizards are really good jumpers. And before you know it, it's time to go. This morning, we are going to Santa Cruz, the last island we'll visit in the Galapagos.
Taxi ride on the water to our bigger boat. It's going to take us to the next island, Santa Cruz.
This is our bigger boat. And when you get inside, it's really not very big. After 2.5 hours of this, I think we all want to get off the boat. We finally arrive in Santa Cruz. Our first stop is Los Gemelos, which are 2 craters that were once underground magma chambers. This is the first one. This is the second one. The collapse of the magma formed these craters. Next we'll walk through a Scalacia forest. Scalacia is a family of shrubs or trees that are only found in the Galapagos. There's a yellow warbler and a ground finch. We are at El Chato Reserve, where we are getting ready to hike among giant tortoises. Here we will see them in their natural habitat. Males can weigh more than 500 pounds, and females average about 250 pounds. There are two types of Galapagos tortoises. The largest, with big round shells, are called domes, and are found on wetter islands that have an abundance of grass and vegetation near the ground. I think this is a mockingbird. Back in the gift shop, you can buy tortoises of all sizes. This is the Charles Darwin Research Station. We are going to see the Tortoise Breeding Center. Tortoises are bred and kept here until they are about 4 years old. At 4 years of age, they're sent back to their home islands. These guys are permanent residents. They were once pets and cannot be returned to the wild. There was also this colorful land iguana here. Later that evening, we saw this fish market. It was entertaining to watch the crowd of pelicans and sea lions as they were tossed unwanted scraps. This street, lined with kiosks, was a popular place to get dinner. This morning, we're going to Tortuga Bay. The path cuts through a forest and is 2.5 miles long. This has to be one of the most beautiful beaches in the Galapagos. Home to sea turtles and marine iguanas, all we saw were the iguanas. Here's one coming ashore. He's heading for the rocks to dry off. It could have been the perfect ending to our visit to the Galapagos, but instead, it ended with a pretty rough kayak ride. I was glad to be back on land. This morning, we're going to the airport at Baltra for a flight back to the mainland. After a 10-minute ferry ride and a 25-minute cab ride, we're on our way to Guayaquil, Ecuador's largest city. In the center of the city is the Metropolitan Cathedral. The original cathedral was destroyed by fire and rebuilt. Construction here was completed in 1936. Across the street is Seminary Park, best known as Iguana Park because of its occupants. Next we wanted to walk on the Malecón, But as we passed City Hall, we noticed that there was a crowd gathering. When we got to the Malecón, we found out that it was closed today because of the demonstration taking place. There were thousands gathered to protest the increase in taxes. So we walked to Las Peñas, the oldest part of the city, where there are over 400 steps leading to the top of Santa Ana Hill. Near the top is a fort and an open-air museum. With cannons used to protect the city against pirates. Now that we've made it to the top, we go into the lighthouse where there are great views of the city. Time to get back to the airport, and finding a cab at the same time the protest was ending was hard.